What does a Dogman sound like? Well, you're about to find out. We've acquired an exclusive audio clip from a special viewer who came forward to share his incredible encounters over the span of a few years. So be sure to watch through to the end so you don't miss a thing. So a couple of months ago, we were contacted by a man named Jack. Of course, I was excited to hear his stories. Who wouldn't be? But little did I know how exciting things were actually going to get. The more we spoke, the more encounters he shared, and the bigger his story became. So rather than just share a story here and there with you, I decided to make Jack's crazy experiences an episode all its own. And if you keep listening, you'll understand why. First, a little background. Jack has a friend that we'll call Mike. Mike is laying low on the subject due to his career in the military. Can't say I blame him. Mike lives in a semi-permanent RV in a gated campground community in Southeast Ohio. And over time, he's built up around his RV, adding 3 rooms and upper and lower connected decks off the sunscreen to create what sounds like a pretty cozy cabin. And this campground, or at least the area around it, seems to be ground zero for Dogman activity. I, for one, want to know where this campground is because Jack says that in the last 5 years, he and Mike have seen at least 7 different Dogmen, as well as several grassmen, or for you non-Ohioans, Bigfoot. Now, Jack and Mike are good buds, but since Jack knew Mike was a kind of guy whose interest didn't usually stay on any one topic for too long, Jack knew his opportunity to experience whatever it is going on in that campground was probably limited. So he squeezed as many trips to the campground to visit Mike as he could. You could say Jack is kind of a storm chaser, but for Dogman. Jack's observations were frequent and numerous. By his estimate, at least 20 over the years. And not only has he told me several stories of his and Mike's encounters, but he has been kind enough to give us here at the InBetween an actual audio recording of one of these Dogman vocalizations. But before we play this for you, I want to give you a taste of the insanity, everything ranging from heartwarming to horrifying, that happened to Jack, Mike, and the other residents of this campground. And for reference, the bulk of these encounters occurred in a 3-year span from 2017 to 2020. Jack and Mike's usual MO was to turn off all the outside lights and sit on Mike's deck like they're sitting in a theater just waiting for things to happen. They call it monster vision. Spring of 2019. Jack and Mike are at the campground waiting out on the top deck watching for Dogmen. On this particular night, things are ramping up about midnight. They see Dogmen running up and down the road in the lighter areas between the trees, and every so often even hear their toenails on the pavement. The only light on is under the upper deck where they're sitting. Suddenly, they both notice there's no more light between the deck boards at their feet. There's a Dogman directly underneath them, but it's gone as quickly and quietly as it appeared. Things slow down after that, so they go inside. And after a while, Jack decides it's time to call it a night. He walks down the outside steps and rounds the corner toward his truck to see a big tail sticking up over the hood by the driver door on the opposite side of his truck, along with a thump from whatever it is hitting the truck. Mike hears the thump, but he doesn't see anything because he's behind Jack on the steps. Now, where Jack parks is beside the bottom of the lower deck, which is enclosed with wood lattice panels. And the only entrance to the space underneath the decks is a 3x3 square opening directly beside the driver door of Jack's truck. Now, they already knew that something big had been going under there. But Jack says he would have had a heart attack had he walked around to get in his truck to see it under there, staring at him. Another encounter took place late summer of 2019, sometime around August. This time, Jack's wife goes with him down to the campgrounds to see Mike. All 3 are sitting inside in the living room talking. Mike's sitting in his chair working on something, and Jack and his wife are on the couch. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this loud thud, like a car had hit the cabin. Jack and his wife look at each other just stunned, and then look over at Mike, who hadn't even bothered to look up from whatever it was he was working on. He pauses and looks up at Jack. Yep, it's on the roof. Happens all the time. After about 45 minutes, they go outside and see freshly torn limbs from the tree beside the cabin laying on the roof. The Dogman had jumped out of the tree onto the roof. The next day, Mike calls Jack and says that a camper he knows a few lots away saw the jet black Dogman run up the hill, climb up the tree, jump on the roof, back down, and run down the hall again. Why is anyone's guess, but I guess seeing them way up in the trees is pretty common. Later on that same year, on a cold, rainy, windy night around the fall of 2019, Jack and Mike are sitting at their usual observation point on Mike's deck, but nothing's happening. So they head back inside, out of the rain. And as they're hanging out inside, discussing various theories regarding life, the universe, and everything, they occasionally hear slight noises outside, but nothing major. And somewhere around 2 a.m., and Mike eases quietly out the door to grab a couple of logs for the fire. He no sooner gets out the door when he comes right back in. He says, "Dude, there's one under the deck." Jack grabs his coat and flashlight, and the two head outside to investigate. Mike tells Jack that he saw it looking through the cracks between the steps from the lower deck up to the upper deck, watching the sliding glass doors going into the cabin. So they start looking around on the ground for any signs of it being there when they find a spot of blood on a pile of boards that it would have been standing on under the decks. And then they find another spot. And another. They follow the blood trail around to the back of the cabin and beyond, up the hill to the regular camping lots that are all in the woods. They wind around the various campers and trailers, following the blood before the rain washes it away. And they obviously can't tell where it's bleeding from, but they find a couple of good-sized spots, like baseball size. So it's not a small wound. Eventually, they track it a few hundred feet from the cabin, and Jack is ready to involuntarily relieve himself out of fear. How close is it? Is it badly injured? And 100 other thoughts are going through his head. And Mike whispers, "He's close." And Jack fires back, "Dude, why are we out here in the cold-ass rain tracking down an injured apex predator?" Mike turns and looks at Jack with a look of something between, "I hadn't thought of that," and "Holy shit," and says, "Let's get back to the cabin." They turn and head back down the hill toward the cabin, and as they turn onto the street that goes to the cabin, they see a set of red eyes on the other end of that street heading straight for them. They run to the cabin, get inside, and lock the door. And Jack looks at Mike and says, "Man, what the fuck is wrong with us?" They hole up until daylight, and Jack gets the hell out of Dodge. In one of the more heartwarming experiences, Jack and his wife were again at Mike's cabin. Jack and Mike are out on the deck trying out Jack's new night scope. It's late winter, so it's fairly cold outside, and both of the ladies are inside where it's warm. After looking around for about an hour, out of nowhere, they spot this big black Dogman lying horizontally across the road on the other side of the lot beside them. They did not hear it or see it come in. It just lies there, watching them watch it. After a bit, they go in and tell the girls, "You guys gotta come out here and see this thing." Jack is freezing, so he stays inside. But both of the women go out. And a minute later, Jack's wife comes in and says, "You gotta come back out." And Jack says, "But I'm still cold." And she says, "You don't have to come outside, just come to the door." So Jack does, and she points down the hill to the bottom of the road by the streetlight, where they can see figures darting back and forth across the road. And they have seen so many dogmen that they can tell by their shape, speed, and by the flashing of the red, amber, and blue glowing eyes that they are dogmen. Jack's wife says, "What are those flashing lights?" And Jack chuckles and says, "That's their eyes." Then she says, "Why are they flashing?" And Jack laughs and starts blinking his eyes and turning his head rapidly to remind her of what eyes do as something is darting around. Both have a laugh at her, duh moment, but she still punches him in the arm and says, "Shut up." They concluded that the big one must have been a parent watching those at the cabin while its youngsters frolicked over the hill. There was no aggression on its part and no fear on theirs. It's the most awesome and funny experience with Dogman. It was just cool, and Jack still marvels when he thinks about it. And undoubtedly, the scariest encounter to date happened on an evening that had, up to that point, been pretty quiet. Jack and Mike are having another spirited debate about a myriad of things until Jack has had enough. He checks his watch, 12:30 a.m. He says, "Hey man, it's been fun, but I gotta get home." And he gets up and starts heading for the door. On his way there, he passes the monitor for Mike's surveillance camera that he installed to keep tabs on the area outside of the cabin. And with that many cryptids crawling around the area, who can blame him? When they hear the familiar half growl, half bark of a dogman, and it stops Jack in his tracks. Both Jack and Mike stay silent, just listening. And the next thing they hear is the familiar creak of the steps that lead to the door. The doorknob starts jiggling ever so slightly. Both men stay motionless and silent. All at once, the floor under their feet rises up. It's in the crawl space under the cabin, and it's pushing up the entire structure from underneath. Jack and Mike are trying to keep their balance as the ground is shifting underneath them and starting to panic just a little. These things have never been this brazen. Mike has had Dogman jump onto the roof before and had them throw things at the cabin, but this is a lot more serious. They hear a noise outside the music room window, which is on the opposite side of the cabin as the door. So Mike goes to the sunroom to check out that side of the cabin, and Jack goes to the kitchen window to peek through the curtains to check the back. And when they meet back in the living room, Mike is sweating and a little more pale than usual. He tells Jack he got down on his knees and pulled up the blinds in the sunroom, which is on the same side as where they heard the noise in the music room. And he sees two big dogmen standing there. Mike says they didn't look at him, but they just stepped back into the shadows. For the next 2 or 3 hours, both men are silent, with Jack in the living room watching the door with his .357 Magnum cocked and ready to go. And Mike sat in the sunroom watching the sliding glass doors that lead out onto the deck with his .45 cocked and ready to go. They could still hear the dogmen outside, and they could still feel the floor raising up once in a while, so they knew one was still under there. Around 5 a.m., Jack says, "Dude, I gotta go. The wife is going to be leaving for work, and I got to get the kids on the bus." And he knew he was already in big trouble for being out all night. And just so you know, there's no cell service at the cabin. So it's not like Jack could call anybody even to let them know where he is. So in a state of absolute terror, where the fear turns to anger, Mike covers Jack while Jack pulls the curtains open in the living room and raises the window, and they both yell, "Come on in, you sons of bitches. Come and get some of this. We are tired of f***ing with you." Then everything is silent. They wait another half an hour. Then they both go outside. Jack runs to his truck and gets inside so he can cover Mike, as Mike walks around to the entrance of the crawl space under the cabin. The crawl space door is shut, and everything that was piled up in front of it, which would have had to have been moved for someone or something to get in there, is put back in different places than they were before, but put back nonetheless. So Jack starts up the truck and drives home, freaked out and still terrified the whole way home. But he gets the kids to the bus on time and goes to work. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, with all of this activity, where's the evidence? Well, Jack wants to get the truth out about these creatures. That's why he got in touch with us in the first place. And with that in mind, he has graciously shared with us some audio that he recorded. So this clip has never before been heard by anyone outside of his friends and family. So without further ado, here is the unfiltered audio of the Dogman. Now keep in mind that this was recorded on an old camcorder, so not the best audio. But here it is again with just a noise reduction filter and a little EQ applied. So what do you think? Actual Dogman vocalizations. So cool! And Jack has a message to everyone out there listening to this today. Be aware of your surroundings at all times. Watch your children closely and listen to them. Don't take what they say with a grain of salt. Above all, continue to enjoy the outdoors. If these things wanted to hurt me or my buddy, they had more than their fair share of opportunity. If you've had either a cryptid or a paranormal encounter, please email us at inbetweentales@gmail.com. And if you're a fan of the Dogman, click here for more Dogman stories. Be careful out there, and we will see you again on the In-Between.